Hey guys, what is up? Slightish here. Today I'm coming at you with a review for the recent Netflix anime, Great Pretender. I'd like to talk about its strengths and what some of its weaknesses are. Now this video will obviously get into spoiler territory a little later on, but I'll be sure to warn you before we reach that point. The beginning of this video will mostly be an overview, as well as include some recommendations for who I think will enjoy this series, and who I think would best steer clear of it. But now, without further ado, this is Great Pretender. With that said, let's jump into things. Great Pretender is an interesting show. After watching the second season, which just recently premiered on Netflix, I couldn't help but discuss it. Its strengths, highlights, fast-paced plot that keeps you on the edge of your seat for every twist and turn. But unfortunately, its faults and failures as well. The show follows Edamura, a small-time con artist and pickpocket working in Japan. We see various escapades he has gone on before the plot picks up, such as working for a sham health product scam, and generally conning people and scamming them over. Right from the start, the show greets you with a very energetic and fun atmosphere. As far as protagonists go, Edamura is mostly just written to be an audience surrogate, and that isn't strictly a negative. Most of what goes on behind the scenes of the show is only known to him when it's revealed to the viewer, and in that role he works well enough, if not fairly one note. But for the first season, it's easy to overlook, as you quickly get whisked away in the excitement of the elaborate cons which make up the bulk of the show. The jazzy and vibrant art style, as well as soundtrack, serve the fun tone of the show very well. And as Edamura gets taken to LA and the events begin to take off, the show really comes into its own. Very evocative of heist films and the like, never slowing down as the events unravel faster and faster, and the stakes rise exponentially. The character who incites many of these events is Laurent, a blonde-haired international confidence man, and the person who takes Edamura with him to LA in a series of events we later learn were orchestrated by him. Laurent is a very interesting character, and every time the audience is led to think they have him pegged, some new element or hook is revealed. We meet other characters as the show goes on who work with Laurent, but Laurent is seemingly the brains behind the organization, often leading Edamura along like a puppet, and through him, the audience as well, as his intricately crafted plan falls into place, piece by piece. Really, I can't recommend the first season of the series enough, especially if you're someone who, like me, enjoys the fun, high-stakes plots of heist films. However, I will warn you that if after the first arc you find yourself getting bored and not enjoying things, don't feel compelled to watch, as I really feel that what the show has to offer is found in those first couple episodes, and on the surface level. The show has a very unique art style as we go through the adventures with Laurent and Edamura, and I feel like it really helps to set the tone of the show as something lighthearted and fun, and I really don't think it should be taken too seriously. The stakes of each arc gradually rise in intensity as each twist and turn gets revealed to us. I'd say now is the perfect time to really start looking at more specific plot elements, so we're going to start covering some spoiler territory. If this recommendation intrigues you, and if you'd like to watch the show but haven't yet, now would be the perfect point to click off of this video and return later once you have. Okay, so for the first arc of the show, I was having a blast. I really do feel like that is unfortunately the best it has to offer. Not that the rest isn't enjoyable, as I did enjoy it, I just feel the flaws become more apparent the longer you stick with the show and the deeper into these characters the writers try to go. And as the viewer, the longer you spend around them, the more the faults become impossible to ignore. The show also falls victim to fridge logic, just many things that I really wouldn't recommend thinking about for too long, as the show is full of plot holes, overused tropes, and various other flaws in terms of the storytelling. Many things that, on review, just really don't make a whole lot of sense. There are also many more overarching flaws, which become much harder to ignore, and which can really hamper your enjoyment of the show the longer you stick with these characters and in this world. Arc 2 and 3 were fun, and had the high-stakes escalation that got me hooked in Arc 1, but many of the tricks used in that arc were now old hat, and the repetition of the characters' actions begins to be more apparent, especially with Edamura, who never seems to learn what to expect from his associates. Not to mention what seems like an attempt to keep Edamura morally pure so the audience could relate to him by having him denounce conning and hand over all the money he made to the police, and spend some time in Japanese prison. I see what they were going for, but honestly, it just feels like too much. And having him get tricked into working with Laurent again after we've already established that aspect of him just felt like a really contrived way to get around the characterization they had written for him, while keeping his moral virtue intact. And I feel like they should have been able to get around this much more smoothly. And I feel like it still doesn't make sense for him not to just leave right off the bat, especially after he was seemingly so strong-willed about it only an episode earlier. And I'm not trying to say that all the depth and backstory they added to their characters is bad, as it isn't. Edinburgh's mother dying and his father leaving him and his mother after getting arrested for child trafficking, despite teaching him the importance of ethics as a child, I found to be very interesting and compelling. And I feel like it could have gone a decent ways to explaining Edinburgh's worldview and why he is so morally strong-willed. I feel like Laurent's backstory involving Dorothy could have added to his character in a very good way if it didn't get as wrapped up in everything as it did. As the second season starts, we see Edinburgh once again trying to make an honest life for himself before getting wrapped up in another con against his will by Laurent. However, this time I can forgive it, as I feel like it almost touched on something really good. Edinburgh getting accidentally wrapped up in a criminal organization who's involved in something that makes him so outraged he has no choice but to help Laurent is an actually intelligent, smart way to get around his moral dilemma they had written earlier, where I feel like the whole plot about him being a mechanic simply wasn't. Not only is that something that I would hope anyone would be horrified to learn of, but specifically with Edinburgh's past and his father being arrested for that very thing, no doubt has his hatred for this type of activity provide a motivation for him to stop it and get back at them in a very interesting way. He hates his father for doing these very things, so of course he hates these people with a passion. But what can he do about it? Making him all the more eager to do something when he finds out Laurent knew about their unsavory practices from the beginning and already has a plan. As the plot goes on, Edinburgh eventually runs into his father, who is working for a Chinese mob, and throughout the season we learn more about him. We also learn about the real reason behind his arrest. And I feel like that father-son dynamic could have been used to great effect. Unfortunately, I feel like it really gets bogged down by some of the repeated tropes and repeated themes that we'd seen in previous seasons being applied again here to the nth degree. It seems almost like they think that if they up the stakes and up the excitement that it's okay and they can get away with using these old hat tricks. However, I simply don't agree. Another thing I feel like I want to mention is the fact that they use many of the victims of the past cons in this final arc, almost returning as supportive characters, which really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, these people were duped out of millions of dollars and they're just so willing to go along with Edinburgh's plan and help Laurent? It doesn't make sense. I know they did try to justify it a little bit with them hoping they could get back at Laurent, but when we do see them and they're all sitting on the boat drinking, it seems like they're all just having a good time, and it really lessens the impact of the first season, I feel. You can really see they tried to emulate the unraveling of mystery after mystery as you slowly find out what happened in the past, like they did in the first season, in the second season. However, I feel it was just too much. They kept upping themselves again and again with these high-stakes situations, and with even crazier and more unexpected twists, and it just got ridiculous and outrageous to the end, to the point where it was impossible to suspend my disbelief. When we find out they had built an entire replica of the Yakuza boss's office, that was just one step too far for me, and it seemed completely unbelievable. I feel like they could have written this con a lot better if they tried to ground things a bit more within reality. Not to say that the first 3 arcs were grounded in reality, however there was just something about them that felt a little more realistic. Like, I could go along with each twist and turn and each shocking development of the story without feeling like it's robbing me of too much of my investment in this world and characters. Another element that I really was disappointed with was the fake-out deaths. There was a few points in the first season where they faked the deaths of characters, and I felt it worked really well, especially in the first arc. I really enjoyed it. However, in this third arc, they fake out the deaths of characters, multiple characters, at least 3 times. It's ridiculous. And by the end, every time you see a character die, it holds no weight at all. It doesn't pack any punch. It's just expected that they're not really dead and they're gonna come back. And they even go one step further. There's a character who they had introduced in flashback episodes named Dorothy. And now Dorothy died in the flashback. And that's the whole reason that provides the motivation to Laurent for the entire show, essentially, is what we find out. However, in the last scene of the show, it's revealed that she didn't actually die and is living somewhere with amnesia. And I feel like that just, I don't know. I mean, of course they're going to do that. Of course they're not going to kill her, because they seemingly can't kill anyone. Every character that they show us, like they've died, they just come right back. It's ridiculous. Not only did it annoy me that they faked out with the deaths so many times, another thing that really bothered me in this season had to do with the psychology around Edinburgh. There's a point in the show where Edinburgh witnesses his friends all die on a boat. His father, Laurent, and the others who are working on this con with him. After they die, he has to go back and live with the Yakuza. We see him in a prison cell at the Yakuza's base where he's completely crushed by the deaths of all his friends, which makes sense, as anyone would be. It's clearly a mind-shattering thing for him, and he's so broken by this that he actually starts to become a Yakuza member. I don't know why the Yakuza are so willing to trust him after this. That's another thing that seemed pretty ridiculous to me, but I'm willing to overlook that. However, he's so torn up about this, he's so completely devastated that he starts ignoring his morals. He starts working for the Yakuza. He starts actually helping them by being an announcer for these auctions that they're holding. And it's completely against every aspect of his characterization that we'd seen up to this point. As supposedly, at this point in the story, he truly believes all his friends are dead, and it's not until his father returns to him secretly and reveals the plot that he knows that the con is actually still going on. But now, that was 2 months after he witnessed all of his friends and his father die. So for 2 months, he's had to accept their death. He's been so morally crushed that he's working for these terrible people who are trafficking children. He's lost all his sense of morals, all his sense of who he is, and he's been completely brainwashed by this huge criminal organization, just devastated. And then he finds out it was all part of this trick and that, his father, Laurent, and all of them were in on it. And now I know Laurent at several points earlier in the show was willing to pull the wool over Edamura's eyes and make him believe that terrible things had happened. But that just seems, like it would be a heinous thing for anyone to do to anyone. And I'm just not believing that Laurent, as we know him, would think that's an okay thing to do to Edamura. It's completely ridiculous. And even if it is an okay thing to do, and so, let's say that Laurent is able to justify that to himself, we still have to analyze Edamura. After he's gone through all this, after he's accepted this horrible life and, been brought in by these horrible people, and he thinks that all this stuff has happened, would he really be so willing to go back and work for Laurent, the guy who made him believe that all this was true, the guy that made him believe that his father really was a scumbag and that he had just died on this boat, that everything had failed? I mean, this seems like it goes so far beyond what their whole plot is, what the whole plan, that it's life-destroying. It's ridiculous, and it's ridiculous to think that he would just hear, oh, you all faked your deaths, okay, I'm back on board with the whole plan. And I know they kind of try to work around that by showing that he is still a little mad at Laurent, that he tries to change the plan partway through or whatever, but this is supposedly after they've already worked together to a certain extent and agreed to actually do this plot, and really doesn't amount to anything. It amounts to one slight difference in the finale. But anyways, well, I thought it was a good show, and I thought it was a lot of fun to just turn your mind off and watch for the first season. I really enjoyed the first 3 arcs that they had of this story. The last arc, in general, I just felt like took a step too far. I feel like there were a lot of really good and really interesting elements there, and I feel like it could have been written in a way where it was just non-stop fun and non-stop blast, but unfortunately, they tried to do too much in this season. They tried to top themselves too hard, and they just, didn't have enough tools in their belt to use. They repeated too many of the things, and it got to the point where every twist that they did we were already expecting, and the ones we weren't expecting were just completely out of left wall, completely ridiculous. However, I will say that if you're the kind of person who enjoys heist movies, who enjoys high-stakes, fun, action-packed situations, who doesn't mind some serious suspension of disbelief, and you're gripped by the sort of abstract art style, I would recommend this show. Regardless of all the flaws that I have with it, I think it's still a great show. I think the first season especially is very strong, and I'd really recommend anyone who is interested in what I've said today to go and check it out. But be warned, things really go off the rails in the second season, and not in a good way. And I would just generally warn you not to get too invested in the plot, not to get too invested in these characters' backstories, and not hope for a satisfying payoff, as I really don't feel we got one in this show. But anyways, that's that. My name is Slightish. I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And please leave a comment down below letting me know what you think of my analysis. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them. And I hope you have a good one.
Hazy in the basement, I've been running through a O. Burning up the wax, all I need is espresso.